So, a popular topic on the SAT is subject verb agreement, something you've probably had many times in English classes. And so, we're going to look at how the SAT tests us on subject verb agreement by looking at some tricky subject verb agreement. And we're going to do this over the course of 2 videos. So, this is part 1 of a 2-part video series. So, get to the edge of your seat because this is going to be mind blowing. Here we go. So the basic subject-verb agreement rule that we have is that a singular verb agrees with a singular subject and a plural verb agrees with a plural subject, which makes a heck of a lot of sense. So when we come across subjects that have an and or an or a nor, that can be a little tricky. So think about how the word and is like a plus sign. So therefore, when you use the word and, you make a subject plural. Even sometimes when it doesn't sound like it's plural, it really is plural. So you will always use a plural verb. So, for example, if I wrote, Mrs. Sware's gentle spirit and absence of sarcasm was or were strangely uncharacteristic this morning, so we called the nurse. Well, I use the word were. And so when I think about it, I actually have 2 subjects. I have spirit and absence, her gentle spirit and the absence of sarcasm. And so even though those individual subjects are singular, spirit and absence, when I glue them together, I've made something plural because of the word and so therefore I use the plural verb were. It sounds sometimes tricky because the word absence and sarcasm are singular, but when I think about how I'm grouping that up with the word spirit, I realize, okay, 1 plus 1 is 2, and that's a plural word. Now, when I get to the word or and nor, that's when it gets a little tricky. We're going to call them our wild cards because they can be both singular or plural. We actually call them disjunctive conjunctions. Wrap your head around that. What that means is they're not really joining anything together, so they're not really conjunctive, but they're being disjunctive. So when I use or and nor, what I do is I look at whatever subject is closer to the verb, and that's the subject which determines the verb. So let me give you an example. If I wrote, neither his wife nor his children knows or know about Mr. Heiser's secret stash of outdated Little Debbie snacks from Wegmans in his desk drawer, well, I see that I have 2 subjects, which are wife and children, but I get to use the verb know. And the reason I'm using the plural verb know is because it's closer to children. So know is the plural verb and knows is the singular verb. That might also sound a little weird to you, but think about like how you would say he knows, but you would say they know. He is singular and they is plural. So in the English language, knows is singular and know is plural. I get to use the word know because I'm agreeing with the word children. But if I switch the order of that subject around, because even though there are 2 subjects there, I could make it singular. I could say neither his children nor his wife knows. You're thinking like all you did was simply switch those 2 words around and the verb changes? It does. Because now wife is closer to the verb, and so I get to use the word knows. That only happens with or and nor. So don't confuse that with the word and. It only happens with or nor. Next, be careful of subjects that are hidden in inverted sentences. So the SAT loves hiding the subject on you. So oftentimes that subject can position themselves sometimes after the verb. And so in inverted sentences, they oftentimes will begin with a prepositional phrase, or they'll even begin with words like here or there. Let me show you an example of that first. If I said, here is or here are the tapioca pudding you requested, Grandma, well, the word here really isn't doing anything in the sentence. So it doesn't matter if you say here is or here are. The word here doesn't make that any different. The thing that's really determining the verb is coming after the verb. In this case, it's the word pudding. The reason I get to use the word is because pudding is really your subject. What you're truly saying is the tapioca pudding you requested is here, Grandma. Also be careful of prepositional phrases, though, because prepositional phrases can sometimes sound like they're the subject, but they're never the subject. So the subject is always somewhere else in the sentence if you only have prep phrases. So in an inverted sentence, the subject kind of gets kicked out to the other side of the verb, and we have to kind of hunt for them. So if I wrote, on top of the jungle gym sits or sit the ravens, ready to pounce on the unsuspecting school children, like a scene from Alfred Hitchcock's film The Birds. Well, in this case, I get to use the word sit, because even though it says jungle gym, that's in a prepositional phrase. So on top of the jungle gym means nothing. The actual subject is the word ravens. And so ravens is plural, so I really am saying ravens sit ready to pounce. So how about that? Be careful of the raven. Oh, be careful of that raven too. They're chomping her gum. Next, subjects that have interrupters. So the SAT, once again, loves to hide the subject. So they oftentimes will separate the subject from the verb with a series of interrupters, just so you have to find that actual subject. So subjects often will travel with some kind of descriptive phrases or modifiers, and it kind of interrupts the flow of the sentence. So you just simply have to say, okay, where is that actual subject? So if I said a family of hippies was handing out or were handing out flowers to each passerby at market last Saturday, well, I see hippies, and hippies is really close to that verb, but hippies is actually in a prepositional phrase. The actual subject is the word family. A family. And you'd say, well, a is always going to make something singular, a family. So you'd say a family was handing out flowers. You wouldn't say a family were handing out. Family, even though it has lots of people in it, is still treated as a single item. If I said Mr. Marsh's class, as well as most of my other classes, bores or bore me to tears with the useless notes and rambling lectures. Well, in this case, there's a long distance between the subject and the verb, and there's a real long interrupter, which is as well as most of my other classes. But truly, the subject is simply Mr. Marsh's class. The fact that you're also including the other classes is nice, but that's actually kind of sitting in a prepositional phrase, and we don't include that. So really, I'm going to use the word bores, because what I'm really saying is Mr. Marsh, because Mr. Marsh's class bores me to tears. Unfortunately, we're just simply dragging those other classes along with us, but really, Mr. Marsh's class is the subject of the sentence. Then we have to also be careful of subjects that sound plural. So there are some vague words in the English language which sound plural but are treated as singular. And you kind of do this naturally. This would be your grammar gut kicking in saying, yeah, these words actually are singular. So someone and somebody, anyone, anybody, everyone, everybody, no one, nobody, they're always singular. It's the last four you have to kind of be careful of. Each, every, either, and neither are always going to be treated as singular. So oftentimes they'll travel with a prepositional phrase, but that cannot impact your choice. Those words are always singular. So kind of put those in your toolbox. Let me show you what I mean. Everybody is coming or everybody are coming over to my house for the Super Bowl to cheer for the Eagles. Well, in this case, everybody is singular. And my grammar gut kind of kicks in and says, yeah, I would say everybody is coming over. Even though everybody certainly is more than one person, we still treat that pronoun as being singular. If I said each of my teachers has or have decided to bless me with busy work this weekend, well, I can see the word teachers, but that's in a prepositional phrase, and the actual subject is the word each. And each is not going to be tempted by that prepositional phrase. Each is always singular, so that's what you have to be careful of. The prep phrase is going to be there to tease you, but the subject is the word each, and each is singular, so you'd say the word has, because you're saying each of my teachers has decided. And there are a couple other common singular plurals we have to be careful of, meaning they sound plural, but they're actually singular. So if I said $10, any kind of amount is always singular. $10 sounds too good to be true to grandma for a quality tattoo at the biker rally. $10 is a lot of single dollars, but we look at it as one collective amount, and so we treat it as being singular. Be careful of measurements, also singular. After a long midweek run, 4 miles was a nice treat for the cross country team on Friday. So even though we look at it as 4 individual miles, we look at it as a collective sort of common singular measurement, and therefore we would say, well, that is simply singular. So measurements and amount, singular. Collective nouns. Macaroni and cheese is or are Isla's favorite comfort food. Well, they're not two individual items. My daughter's not eating both macaroni and cheese, but it's all combined. So there's certain things which we just treat as being a collective noun. So macaroni and cheese is Isla's favorite comfort food. And lastly, be careful of titles and topics. Oftentimes they'll sound plural, but we treat them oftentimes as being singular. So just like grammar, mathematics joyfully resonates with logically minded students. Even though, sure, it ends in an S, words like mathematics, ethics, there's a lot of them that are always treated as being singular. So we say resonates, not resonate. All right, so let's practice these, and then we'll come back and take a look at part 2 of our video of other tricky subject-verb agreement.